and welcome to the F12 webcast. Today we're going to be talking about this concept of nation-state cybersecurity and whether it's what it is, first of all, whether it's achievable for small and medium businesses. How do you tell if you need it? What are the capabilities that we don't think most businesses or organizations have that are incredibly important as we move forward in the cyber threat landscape? I am joined by two experts to help us navigate this topic, David and Nicole from Blackpoint Cyber. Welcome.
Hi, thank you for having us.
First of all, you're both new to the audience here. Let's figure out who you are. Nicole, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do at Blackpoint.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Nicole. I've been with Blackpoint now for almost 6 years. So I feel like I've been with the company since we only had like 12 people, and now we've grown to, like 90. So it's been pretty awesome. I am a partner success manager over here at Blackpoint. So I work with our MSP partners to help them educate their customers about managed detection response, cybersecurity. I help them with sales resources. I help them with basically anything under the sun. So, yep, that's me.
Fantastic. And so obviously you help organizations like F12 be successful with the services that Blackpoint offers. David, I'm going to go to you now. You have, first of all, what I got to say is one of the coolest titles I've come across. If I've got it right, you're the Director of Threat Research. And not only that, but you have a really wicked badge behind you, Adversary Pursuit Group. So I'm excited to hear, what do you do with Blackpoint Cyber?
Oh, well, thank you. So hats off to our internal graphic designer for that one. She did an amazing job on it. I love it. I have it everywhere at the moment in my office. So, so what we do, how can I describe it? We have two main missions. One is the production of actionable threat intelligence, which is really important. That's for all of our customers, for our internal and external. And by that, I mean, we deliver to the SOC, we deliver to marketing, we deliver to the sales team. But more importantly, we also deliver to the wider community. We want to make sure that everyone is aware of any of the research that we're doing and they can benefit, whether they're a customer or not. That's really important to us because this is a team effort. The other side of things is rapid development of proof of concepts. So a new vulnerability comes out, we might either acquire the proof of concept from someone else and test it. We might develop it ourselves. We may even come up with a new idea about something the product isn't catching, isn't detecting, and we'll go ahead and build it. We'll build it for engineering, prove that it's even feasible, and then throw over the requirements and that initial proof of concept to them. So really, it's anything to do with threats, adversaries. We will investigate it and dig into it deeper.
So to dumb that down, you're the team running behind the scenes to make sure that as vulnerabilities and threats come up, there's a way to fix them.
Absolutely.
Yeah, gotcha.
So we engage very closely with the SOC, who are our front line. They're always there working away, and we just like to give them tidbits of information to make them more successful.
And David, in this context, so our audience could follow along, what do you mean by the term SOC?
So our Security Operations Center. So they're the ones who are monitoring 24/7 any of your customers or anyone that's running our agent. They will look for malicious events and then take responsive actions on those endpoints to make sure that people are protected.
Perfect. And we're going to dig into that a little bit further. So that's great. So Security Operations Center, you're involved with that in equipping them with the tools and techniques that they require. I want to take a step back, first of all, and explore the company, Blackpoint Cyber. And I think it's a good layup for the overall conversation. Talked about this idea of nation-state grade security. First of all, I was first introduced to Blackpoint by our very excited CTO and security officer, Calvin Engen. And he doesn't get excited very often. Like, I've been trying for 2 years to get him impressed about Putin and old fashions in Calgary. And he's always like, I've had better. He's got a high bar. So when he was raving about the capabilities of our new partnership in Blackpoint, I was really interested to find out what it was. And then I learned a little bit about the history of the company and some of its backers and the governance. Nicole, tell us a little bit about Blackpoint Cyber, its origins, and what makes it unique.
Yeah, sounds good. I can absolutely do that. So let's see. It's a pretty colorful history, I would say. So our CEO and founder, John Murchison, he spent about 12 years at the National Security Agency as a cyber operative, basically. So he was an offensive cyber operative for the United States.
Fascinating.
Yeah, so he, really knows the tactics and the methods that hackers use on a daily basis. And so when he pivoted out of the NSA, and this was, I think, in about 2007 or so, he was like, I want to build a platform and a service that would be able to catch those exact types of tradecrafts and methods that he used in his daily, in his previous life. So that's what he did. He built a little team of people, and they spent about 3.5 years just building the software that our team uses. And I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about that. But yeah, so they spent, that long amount of time just working on the software, and we weren't doing any marketing, we weren't doing any type of events, we weren't doing anything. We were just building the software. So we are first and foremost a cybersecurity software company. And then, we also have a pretty amazing board of directors and just people who have,
Do you ever have an amazing board? Tell us a little bit about who's on it.
Well, we have several notable people, but I'll just highlight a couple because I do feel like it really shows the expertise that we have in this industry and kind of the clout that we have, I would say. So one is General Hayden. He's the former director of the CIA and the NSA. We also had Chris Inglis, who recently had to leave our board, but only because he is now the National Cyber Director for the United States. So, pretty
Wow.
big heavy hitters in the industry. We have some other notable people as well, but I won't go into all of their
Ambassadors or
biographies. But
former ambassadors, like it's an impressive
mhm,
board to be sure.
yeah.
I had the privilege, gosh, maybe about 4 years ago, in timelines are always pre-pandemic, listening to General Hayden at a cybersecurity conference, and it was terrifying and incredibly informative.
Sure.
Probably longer ago than I care to admit. That is absolutely fascinating.
Apparently, he's also very active on Twitter. That's what I hear. I couldn't believe it when somebody said that, but yeah, apparently he has
There you
an
go.
informative Twitter account too. So,
So the governance and the pedigree is really interesting because you've got this the tradecraft was I think the word you used, Nicole, about bring about. David, it would occur to me that you would know a little bit about this. So what are some of the unique things that would have got our CTO so excited that Blackpoint has brought to businesses that obviously not every organization can draw upon the expertise of former NSA operatives, I would suggest.
Oh, you love asking the difficult questions. There's so much. No, my favorite thing, I will touch on this, is the live network mapping. So one of the biggest things you always see a threat actor do is map out the infrastructure when they're commencing an attack. It's the first thing they'll always do. They'll look at any open endpoints that are internet facing, but they'll also look internally once they gain access, because lateral movement is a big part of a campaign spreading.
Lateral movement meaning getting into one spot, trying to get through the network, eh?
Yeah, moving to the next device and the next device so that you can then, if you're, say, a ransomware threat actor, you're going to infect multiple devices, have the biggest impact. If you're, say, a nation-state actor stealing intellectual property, you might be looking for that one machine that has all the juicy bits you want to take. But what we do, we adopt the same principle. We map out your network. Every live device, we see it within the console. So we know exactly what devices are connected to the network. Even the devices that aren't running our agent, we monitor when those connections come in. So we can detect when a no agent device will connect. That's probably one of the best things in my mind, because it gives us a live view of what's happening on the endpoint. And then we can go back historically and see that data. I think it's every 5 minutes there's a timestamp taken, and we can go back 5-minute intervals and look at the data at that time in between. Don't hold me to that, but we can monitor it. So
perfect.
That's a big piece for me. I think that's a really important piece, because when we see something interesting happening, not only do I have the event surrounding the alert, I can go back historically and see every event leading up to that point.
So just anchoring where we're at, Thank you very much for explaining it. We've got an impressive organization that spent years using its experience to build software that has these incredible capabilities to protect networks and systems and businesses and data and all of those sorts of things. But it occurs to me, the question we should ask is, why, David, is this even necessary? I mean, I think when it comes to cybersecurity, a lot of business leaders just think, well, I've got antivirus, I got firewalls, I'm doing something called patching. Heck, I even got everybody to do training every year, and they answer questions. And F12 just twisted my arm hard enough that I got this stupid MFA thing that every time I log in, I gotta, have another authentication. So I'm good. Like I'm looked after. Why is that not enough?
It's not enough because threat actors are constantly evolving the way they act. Every time we introduce a new defensive measure, they come up with a counter to that. And that's really important. Take AV. You talked about that at the start there. That's one
Antivirus,
of the
yeah.
Everyone needs an antivirus solution. That this is not an argument, and this is not me saying you shouldn't have one. But an antivirus solution is set to search for very specific file type formats. And what I mean is an executable, a DLL, a dynamic library. Those are the bread and butter of an AV solution. But we don't tend to see an executable deployed until multiple steps into an attack chain. So if we take something like the Black Cat ransomware group, we know that they use RMM tools. They will actively investigate an environment, work out what services and processes are running well before they will deploy any ransomware. Chinese nation state, they don't actually deploy any executable. They'll deploy a web shell, which is not something an antivirus will search for because it's not a file type format they look for. And they spend a lot of time physically interacting with the device that they're connected to. It's a person on the end of another device typing out commands, which an AV solution is not going to look for. All of these things that we're suggesting, things like MFA, multi-factor authentication, is a means of limiting the attack surface as much as possible. But none of these things are infallible. So MFA, in the right scenario, you can bypass it for about $4.
Okay, that's crazy.
It is.
So MFA, explain to me, to the extent you're allowed to, how a threat actor would go about thwarting or getting around multi-factor authentication.
Okay, so let's take, for example, there is a tool out there that I don't know if I should mention. I feel very bad about enabling people to do these things. Okay,
that's all right. Yeah,
there's a tool that's open source that you can download, and the idea is that I can use SMTP relays, which means I have a server that's designated for sending out emails.
Email relay, yeah.
Email relays, yeah. So I make it look like you just received an email from your CEO. It looks
which is relatively easy to do. I've shown people how I can even my limited skills can make that email. Yeah.
Yep, there you go. And I make it look like it's a SharePoint link or an Office link to a document, a process document I need you to review. This is really critical. We need it out by the end of the day because our customers are expecting it. So you click on this, and what happens is effectively a man-in-the-middle attack. You're taken to a web page that looks very similar to Office 365. Maybe it's Office with a 1. So Office.com.
I'm following you so far, but you know what I'm thinking is that, well, this is what MFA is supposed to stop. So
this is where it gets interesting.
Yeah.
So you enter your password and your username.
Yeah.
The man in the middle sends that onto Office.com for you.
Okay.
And then you receive the MFA authentication. You accept that on your phone. The authentication request is sent back, and the man in the middle captures the session cookies for your MFA authentication. And from there, what you do is you paste them into your browser. By paste, I mean you genuinely paste them into your browser, refresh your browser, and you're logged into Office.com as the user who's just logged in. And from there, what you then do is you create your own session cookies. You create your own MFA authentication tokens and maybe a new user so that you can log in whenever you want.
Okay, you're just terrifying me right now. So
I mean,
I'm gonna say what I
multiple ways to get around it. I don't want to scare people. So.
Yeah, and this is why you're the expert and all of this information. So basically, you're a bad actor can thwart MFA by stimulating or causing a legitimate MFA request to come through, or what you think is you
Yes.
approve MFA. Now they're using that approval to now get in. And you seem to be indicating there's many different ways of doing that, and you've kind of revealed one.
Yeah, but the great situation about that is all of those steps result in footprints. I'm going to call them footprints for ease of digestion here. So when you log in using those MFA credentials, you will be a new IP from a new address, which Office will capture. We see it. We see it in our product cloud response. So we can see when someone is logging in from a new device. So unless they're able to identically match the device that they've just stolen the credentials from, we'll detect it. We'll also see things like the new credentials being created. There's a lot that you can then see because MFA is enabled. And what we can then do is work out what legitimate MFA authentication and use cases are versus the malicious ones. So if
this is where intelligence comes
they create a new token, they delete items, that's something that should alert us.
Oh, all right, David, this is fascinating.
Sorry, I could talk about this for hours, and I know.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I feel like there's threads here I want to pull on, but let's frame this conversation if we can, Nicole. And you and I were discussing earlier, there's sort of a framework to help us understand this that NIST has developed, and maybe this is a good time for us to explore this framework and what Blackpoint's doing to solve it. Does that sound fair?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. I have brought up a little slide that we use sometimes to help explain what the NIST framework is and why it matters, because this is something that's really critical to our clients, and they go, well, F12 is the IT provider for hundreds of businesses in Canada, and they go, well, aren't we looked after already? So Nicole, can you take us through a little bit of what the NIST framework, maybe what NIST is, what the NIST framework is, and how it helps us understand all the scenarios that David was just illustrating?
Yeah, absolutely. So the NIST framework is one that, like you said, Devon, it's just a good framework for us to kind of put into perspective all of the pieces to security that one needs to have in place. And that, when I say one, I mean any company, any size, any industry. This can really kind of be universally used for all of those. So this is something that we use as, when a customer or a company is like, okay, I get it. You guys are scaring me. David just told me all these ways that hackers can, get past my preventative measures. So they understand that, but then they're like, okay, but how do we know what tools that we need? Because, as I'm sure everyone who's here knows, the cybersecurity industry is just chock full of so many tools that all do so many different things, and they don't integrate well together. And you're just like, where am I supposed to put my budget? Where am I supposed to put my money for this type of tool? So the NIST framework, I think, helps to dial down and illustrate, okay, these are the pieces that you really need to make sure that you are covered. And so there's 5 pillars. We call them pillars. So the first is identify. So that means, you want to make sure that you know what is out there. You want to know what is in your network. You want to know how many devices you have. You want to know what is connecting to those devices. Not only what are my devices, but do I have third party people connecting in? Do I have people walking into my office with cell phones? All of these things. So Blackpoint does help with that. David mentioned earlier about our network mapping. That is part of our software. We map out the entire network. We show all the devices. We show all of the devices that are connecting to the internet, via the network. So we're going to be able to see printers. We're going to be able to see IoT devices.
And I was just going to say, it's not obvious to everybody. They think about, their Windows and MacBooks and their servers, but it can be their fish tank or their HVAC system or their whatever else in the network. Yeah.
Yeah, we actually, just real quick, I'll just a little quick story. We had a woman who her son had jailbroken their Xbox at home, and
Of
so
course
a
he had.
hacker was able to get from that to her work computer. So that was a situation where we were able to step in and help. So anyway, so the identify piece is very important. Then you have protect, which is going to be your preventative measures, your AV, your MFA. Making sure that you are hardening all of the environment as much as you possibly can. And that means not only the network, but also the cloud side as well. So making sure that you have MFA set up on everybody, making sure that people who shouldn't have admin access don't have it. Like not giving your lower tier people, access to the keys to the castle, basically. So that is also important. Firewalls, EDRs, that's all there. The next piece is the detect. So that is where Blackpoint, well, the detect and the respond pieces are kind of the two pieces that I would say Blackpoint really come into play. So the detect piece is making sure that you're going to have something in place to catch the hackers when they are able to get past your protection that you have in place. Because like David was talking about, we are assuming that even if you have all of those preventative measures in place, they're still important to have, and it will reduce the risk. But we are still assuming that hackers are going to be able to get past that. So the detect piece is making sure that you have something like Blackpoint's 24/7 MDR in place, where we will be able to see that hacker tradecraft, once they do get past those initial preventative measures. And then the respond piece is very important. I feel like we haven't touched on it that much yet, but not only do you want to have somebody to detect that type of activity, but you also want somebody to respond to it. And when I say respond, I don't mean just sending you an alert and saying, hey, something strange looks weird, do something about it. Here's some steps for you to do something about it. What I mean is someone actually taking a active response. So isolating a device, hey, this device is doing something strange. Somebody's running
Oh,
suspicious
yeah.
PowerShell or mounting a share, or whatever it is. And being able to actually isolate that device, cutting it off from the rest of the network, not allowing that hacker to continue to spread. And then on the cloud side, making sure that if somebody's logging in from a strange country and then setting up an external forwarding rule that should not be there, somebody needs to be able to disable that account, like in the moment, 2 o'clock in the morning, on a holiday, whatever it
Nicole,
is.
do you mind if I explain a little bit about what that means? Because
Yes,
this is something
sure.
we've seen quite frequently. So somebody gets into your, let's say your Office 365 account, your online email, and you don't know because they don't do anything except for in the background, they've set up a little rule that emails get copied over to them. And now they're just watching for a transaction to happen, sometimes for months. And now you're in the process of setting up something to do with your finances, your banking, and then they get themselves in the middle of a legitimate conversation. And this is what we've seen. And so being able to detect that and then respond to it, even though it's got nothing on your internal network, it's got to do with the cloud, is important here. Just wanted to make sure that sometimes you hear these things, but I have lived experience supporting organizations through some of these in our communities.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So yeah, definitely, making sure that any company that you're speaking to about these services, the MDR that we're talking about, making sure that they are actually going to be taking that active response and not just sending an alert. And then lastly, the recovery phase. So this is, we refer to it as right of boom. So, boom is whatever the hacker came to do, they completed it. And we obviously do our best, and we've been very good at this in the past of not allowing them to get to that point. But you do want to make sure that you have something in place for in case there is some type of breach, making sure that you have your backups, making sure that you have cyber insurance. And cyber insurance is something that Blackpoint also can help with as well. So yeah, so hopefully that is helpful.
Do you mind? I'm going to try an analogy because I'm the king of analogies around here. And the one I like to use is fire protection, or just the whole industry of, what we do in order to protect our businesses and sometimes our homes from the event of a fire. Like we got identified. So there's a whole regime that makes sure that we have codes and inspections and protections vis-a-vis, fire. You just can't. You have to have certain situations set up in your building, and then we have protections in place. There's GFI plugs. There's breakers. We don't cause electrical fires, which was most of them. The materials we make everything out of. And then we have fire extinguishers in case something does happen so we can kind of respond, and we need all those things. But then we also have in commercial buildings fire detection, whether they're detecting smoke or heat or those sorts of things. And then there can be alarms that go off. And then there's a response, which the fire department's coming, things are happening. The fires in our data centers, I know there's like fire suppression, some kind of a chemical that goes out, like a response happens immediately. Then of course there's recovery. You're going to want to have insurance. You're going to want to have a way to get your property, your physical assets back to a state where you're not financially out. And so you need all of those steps.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why we have the green check marks and the black check and the black X's on this particular NIST framework is it's a conversation when we're talking to our clients about where F12 has their back. If you're following our recommendations, we're helping them with identify, protect, backup, DR planning, getting all that going. But the detection and response is the part where we lean into Blackpoint. And you used a term there, MDR, which just to unpack for everybody is managed detection and response. So it's obviously it fits those two pies, detection and response. So hopefully this little journey into NIST was helpful for the audience to understand what you have, generally speaking, and what you may be missing in your organization when it comes to cybersecurity protections in the NIST framework. All right, fantastic, Nicole. Thanks very much. David, I kind of want to start with you about now that we've kind of got the NIST framework. Where should an organization start, broadly speaking? So let's say that they don't have many, like they don't have any of these green check marks. How should they approach this?
So the easiest thing to do is look at what you have, what products are in place, whether you need physical protection, cyber protection. Start with that. Work out what you think you need to protect and look at the products that match that. Don't assume that there's one product out there that will do everything. There is no silver bullet. And if anyone tells you that, they're lying. I know I've gone all serious with this, but it's a real problem in the industry. There is a lot of overpromises that and kind of security cowboys out there that sell you something that doesn't fit your needs. So it's really important as customers that you understand what you're trying to protect so you don't spend what is quite an expensive market. But there are a couple of things that you always need. An AV solution, absolute must. An intrusion response plan for when they get in, because they will get in eventually. And then a detection and response capability. Now, I'm going to say MDR. Go for an MDR, not just an EDR or XDR, because if you end up having the reliance placed upon your shoulders to respond to an action, if you're not maybe as security aware as some are, and realistically a security company like ours, we have security aware people, it may be that you don't respond quickly enough. We've had an incident, not here, thankfully, back in a previous place. We asked for an image of the server that was compromised, and what we got was a photo of the server.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So that's the level of, worry for me.
I have to do a timeout, David, and be the acronym police there. So you mentioned XDR, TDR,
Sorry.
MDR. No, don't apologize. You're the expert. I'm the dummy in the conversation. So help me understand what the difference is and how people may think they've got something that they don't, or why those other may be inadequate.
So endpoint detection and response is literally, as it sounds, a detection capability and a response capability for your endpoint. Okay. XDR is the evolution of this, and it's a buzzword at the moment across the entire security community. But what it means is extended detection and response. It'll be the detection and response capabilities of an endpoint mixed with the networking information, maybe log captures, other pieces of information, all in one central location, like a data lake, that they will then respond to. The problem with that is that there are no standards for XDR. So I could capture PCAP information and have something that scrapes your logs, and I could call it XDR and charge you just as much as another product that does a little bit more.
Okay. And we, the unsophisticated buyers, really have no way of knowing much about this.
That is true. Okay. So one of the best things you can do is ask your security providers what their flaws are. Really engage with them. Ask them the hard questions. If they don't feel comfortable answering them, then maybe they're not the company for you. Because security products should be transparent and tell you where those failures are going to be and what they're doing to address them. Because they need to be giving you peace of mind that you're buying the right product for your needs. But my advice, AV, IR plan, and buy an MDR. have a team of people monitoring your platforms who know what to do in a situation. They know what they're looking for, they know what bad looks like, and they know how to respond to that.
So, broadly speaking, then, an intelligent endpoint detection product, which,
Yep.
broadly speaking, F12's clients get kind of built in with antivirus and all that sort of
Yes.
stuff, gets
Yep.
you something. But you're saying
Exactly.
the
Yeah.
managed, now you've got the power of people, intelligence, a security operations center behind the scenes
Yeah.
to support that. Okay. I
Yeah.
mean, to me, going back to the fire analogy, the fire protection analogy, it's kind of like it it's great if you have like smoke detectors and all the rest, but if there's not like a company that is seeing the alarm and then responding by calling the fire department, you just have alarms going off. Like it's not, nothing's,
Yeah.
the cavalry isn't
Yeah.
coming, if it were.
Yeah, relying solely on an AV solution is like saying we've got a sprinkler system, but it may not work.
Oh, okay. That's a great analogy. All
Maybe it
right.
only works for a particular type of fire because you can't have a sprinkler system working for an electrical fire, and maybe your system is only designed to catch one specific fire type. You know,
All
that's the
right.
best way I can describe it.
Okay. Interesting
Or
analogy.
gas, like if there's a
Yeah,
gas
there you go.
leak or
Yeah,
something,
yeah.
you're
The fire department will respond to both of those situations, but only one scenario will raise an alert for them. Will
Yeah.
raise
Okay.
get the fire department in.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. Yeah. And sometimes you need a human to be able to
Yeah,
tell what's going on.
absolutely. Yeah.
So Nicole, we talked about the NIST framework. We talked about how there's this, generally speaking, a gap in capabilities around the detection and then the response. David explained how there's tools that may advertise themselves to do bits and pieces of it and do some automated detection and response. And I don't think you said they're useless, David. They're just in a different category below
Yeah.
managed detection and response. So it makes me think, like, Nicole, how many like organizations are embracing managed detection and response to fill this gap? And like, is this something that the marketplace is attuned to, or where are we at with regard to that?
Sure. So before I answer that question, I wanted to quickly touch on kind of the previous conversation that you all were having
Okay.
about the acronyms that exist and kind of the differences between them. And it's really confusing. And so everyone who's out there, I'm sorry that it's so confusing. But I just wanted to point out that there are there are the EDR tools out there, and we all know them as, the big ones I can think of are, Sentinel One, Sophos, CrowdStrike, all these tools, and they all actually do have what they call MDR services that are built on top of them.
Okay.
So just to kind of clarify that, although the term MDR might be used in certain situations, it doesn't always necessarily mean that the MDR that they're doing is true MDR. So I won't go too far into this, but like for instance, the MDR that comes along with, whatever EDR tool you might be using, they're only monitoring their tool. They're only pulling in the telemetry from their tool. Now, Blackpoint, we do true MDR where we are not only pulling in telemetry from our tool that we built, but we are also integrating with all of those EDR tools as well. So we are pulling in telemetry from Sophos, Sentinel One, CrowdStrike, you
I
name it,
see.
all of these tools. So we're pulling in so much good and useful information, and we're not relying only on ourselves. I mean, we do rely a lot on ourselves, and we don't want to rely only on these EDR tools. But just to kind of put that out there that, hey, if you're talking to a company and they're saying that they do MDR, please make sure to ask them, okay, what are you actually detecting with? Are you only using your internal tool or are you integrating with other tools? And number two, coming back to that response piece, are you actually going to be responding or are you going to be sending us an alert? So just
And
just to point out that
and maybe I'll come in here because this is actually where I feel like F12 adds real value to the conversation. We subject our cybersecurity partners and our stack to rigorous third-party testing. This is like our CTO is maniacal about it. And the reason why we became a partner of Blackpoint was because we had an MDR solution, And when a red team exercise, when we brought in external cybersecurity experts to test it out, to do red team exercises, which is where they actively try to breach our network, not just a pen test, but even further, like really trying to get in there, it didn't know anything was going on. It wasn't a blip. It was quiet as a mouse, which is what you don't want. There's no detection, let alone a response. Went
And
on
we
a
built
hunt.
a case study all around that.
Yes, we built a case study on it.
Yeah.
We partnered with Blackpoint, hired the same firm again and others subsequently, and it was immediate. It was, and this is where Calvin Engen, our CTO, has been ranting and raving ever since, and is an avid fan. So part of our job as your trusted technology partner is to look at this really crowded landscape of marketing. If I think I can use that term since I'm a CMO, marketing noise that purports to be sometimes more than it is, and select and test and validate the solutions that we can recommend with confidence to our customers. And Blackpoint is one of those. So, yeah, anyway, I just wanted to give that context, because it's not what you just said, Nicole, is not hot air. The person I trust the most on it validates it, and that's why we're talking today.
I'm glad,
all right,
I'm glad you touched on that. Like, it's impressive that you did an actual pen test. We see pen tests thrown around an awful lot, where pen testers are given direct access to devices, and they bypass so many of the steps that an attacker would do, and it doesn't actually result in anything truly malicious. It's like they've opened calc.exe, or they've renamed something, and it's not bad. I'm glad that I love it when companies do a proper pen test, because not only is it good to test the product and answer the questions of whether or not it's going to meet your security needs, but for me as a researcher, it gives me a whole bunch of free data to play with about how red teamers are changing their tactics for attacking products as well, which means I can take that and improve our product to catch it even quicker next time.
Yeah, very good point.
Okay, so now, sorry, I'll bring it back to
segue
Devon.
finished.
Your
We're
question.
back in. All right, very good.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, so you asked how often businesses use MDR solutions, right? That was your question. Okay. Yeah. So I would say that it is starting to become pretty much no longer an option across the board. At least, I mean, we deal over here at Blackpoint, we deal with, thousands of endpoints, hundreds and hundreds of customers. And it's really starting to become something that, cyber insurance is requiring. Compliance is requiring. So I think it's really, I mean, I don't have an exact number of the percentage, but I would say it's definitely becoming something that every organization is starting to at least understand that they need. Maybe they don't have it in place yet, but they are talking about it, or or their IT provider is talking about it with them. So I would say it's in the process of becoming something that every organization has in place. But once again, when it comes to, do they have actual MDR in place, that stands to question. But
the reason I asked the question is it's struck me that we've been one of those IT providers recommending MDR, and we eat our own dog food. It's what we have embraced to help protect F12 and by extension our customers. And I got to tell you, a year or two ago, it wasn't a very receptive audience. And all of a sudden, the last 12 months, the marketplace seems to be much more interested in engaging in MDR, and we're seeing it added to more and more organizations that F12 does business with. And that's my sample of businesses across Canada, and what was a cold topic is now a hot topic, is what I might say. So that bodes well. I guess the myth that putting antivirus in and having good passwords is going to protect you is finally being eroded, probably from painful experience. David, Nicole she went into some really great details about what separates kind of good MDR from bad MDR. Is there anything else? And I'll free you to talk as tech as you want for the next few minutes. Is there anything else you want to explore about that topic?
Yeah, no. In my mind, there's two things, maybe three. Technology and the people behind it. That's the honest truth. What I mean by the people behind it is you need to have great engineers who are forward thinking and always innovating. Innovation is key to keeping up with security changes. You also need the threat researchers, the people, well, I say threat researchers, but the threat minded individuals who are thinking like the bad guys. Think evil, do good. They are a core component. You could have the best technology in the world. It does automated responses, but that will fail at some point. And there are nuances that humans will be able to react to better because they'll see something that raises a suspicion for them. Individual acts, so Chinese APT entering one command a day. I doubt very much that we would see an automated EDR respond to that correctly, but the brains behind the people side of things will, and they'll be looking for it. And then the technology side of things, not only the ability to detect and respond, but how much data they collect and where they correlate it. If you see EDR companies and MDR companies talking about data lakes and making sure that all of the data is in one central location, you hear them talking about integrations with other products that you're going to install into your security stack, that makes a good MDR. That's a great MDR right there.
So it's not an island; it's part of the whole ecosystem.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. So if they're talking about how they can respond, whether you install SentinelOne, Silence, CrowdStrike, they can see those AV alerts and they'll take action on them as well. They'll look at providing context around them because a lot of AVs, they don't provide context. It's not a failing on their part, but you can imagine how much data they're dealing with on a daily basis. Those kind of MDR solutions, they're going from good to great.
Okay, excellent. I really appreciate the context, David. I think about so these sort of capabilities to actually detect and respond, Nicole, were something that enterprises had. I mean, they would maybe hire the ex-NSA operative to run their security operations center and try to get everybody they could from university to work for them as security agents and run a 24/7 security operations center. But I'll be honest, I don't think any of the clients that we support would have the $1 million of budget it would take to obtain that sophistication. And that's assuming that you could get the talent, because one thing I do understand is the talent is in short supply when it comes to cybersecurity expertise, all the more so if it's experienced. So this is my layup for the question about, how is Blackpoint and MDR helping bring these capabilities to businesses? How can an organization get this capability? What's the barrier to entry is another way to put it.
Well, yeah. So to your point about how much it costs to run a SOC, obviously, Blackpoint, we can speak from experience that
Yeah, I bet.
yes, it is a very, very, very expensive endeavor. Um, I mean, like probably $500,000 per year kind of thing. I mean, you have to take into account the number one, the manpower. You have to have people working around the clock. You have to have tier 1, tier 2, possibly tier 3 analysts working for you. You have to have the software in place. And you mentioned that enterprise companies, are the only ones that have this kind of thing. And honestly, you'd be surprised how many enterprise companies actually don't have a very efficient SOC in place. Maybe they have the money and they're throwing it at software solutions, but it's obviously not working that well because a lot of the breaches that we hear about in the news are enterprise, huge enterprise companies. So they obviously are not doing, all the things that they need to do. But yeah, so Blackpoint Cyber, our whole business, our whole mission is to alleviate these costs. By handling all of that for our customers and by making it available to every customer, no matter how big. I mean, we have customers that range from 5 endpoints to thousands of endpoints, an airline, but if you're a
Wow.
small organization and you think that having security like what we've been talking about today is impossible for you, you are wrong. I mean, it's possible that you will have to find some budget for it, but it is insurmountably less than trying to do it yourself. So Blackpoint does all of that for you. We have the people, we have the technology, we have the processes, and we work with companies like F12 to be able to provide that to all of the organizations that you all handle. And so, yeah, I would say the barrier to entry is very minimal. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, and I think it fits. I mean, the analogy to the business I'm in, we're obviously in managed IT services. And by and large, organizations can't afford to have a network specialist and a specialist on cloud and a specialist on databases and, and it goes on and on and on. And so nor the expense to build out a security or a network operations center, respond, all that sort of stuff. And so they partner with organizations like ours, so we can provide that en masse for them. This is the analogy to the security business. You can enter with a few endpoints, receive these protections, and get the collective wisdom and sophistication of Blackpoint. Well, this was an education. Thank you, Nicole and David, very much. Before we wrap it up, is there anything else you want to make sure you mention before I conclude the webcast for today?
David, I know you always have something to say.
I don't know if that's a compliment or not. No. No, I think that's really important. Is you touched on small enterprise. The question you need to ask yourself when you're trying to justify purchasing a security solution is, can you afford not to? The average cost of a ransomware attack is upwards of $6 million. If your small business goes down, will you be able to recover? When you look at your critical systems, no one ever thinks of, maybe their payroll accounts. They're thinking, what keeps my business running? But if you can't pay your employees, how long before they stop working? And then how long before your business goes down? There's a lot
or you can't get on top of AR would be another one, because you need the cash in the door too.
Yeah. That's those kind of questions are surprisingly difficult to ask yourself. And I think when you come to look at your security stack, the cost of hiring, a security team, we've talked about it, is quite expensive if you're going to do it internally. The cost of a security product does guarantee that you get that mindset and knowledge from across the entire security organization. What's quite nice as well is that for me personally, as a threat researcher interacting with the SOC, I don't care whether you're a small company or whether you're a big company. Where the data comes from is irrelevant to me. My job is to make sure that anything that we find, any protections we put in place, is made so that it can go into any environment, to any customer, whether you're 2 endpoints, 1 endpoint, or 1,000, 2,000 endpoints.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So, ask yourself the difficult questions. If you're trying to justify buying a security product, ask whether or not you can afford not to. It sounds like a sales pitch, and I'm really not a salesperson. They wouldn't let me on these calls. And yeah, ask yourself whether or not you can live without it. And I promise you, the answer will probably be no.
I think we have a question, actually, Devon. I'm sure you saw that.
Questions.
I did not. Let me bring up the question. Perfect. And I should remind everybody that they're welcome to ask questions for whatever reason. Let me go to the Q&A. The question we've got is, how often should a business review their security providers? How often should, for example, David, you were talking about the importance of penetration testing that F12 does, just to make sure that there's, I'm going to go back to the old antivirus days. I just remember, and I won't use the names, but we'd roll out one antivirus and it seemed to work, and then 6 months later, 18 months later, it sure didn't. And then you had to validate that it was still working. So how often should people get pen tested to validate their security stack?
Depends how often you feel comfortable trusting in the product you purchased, I suppose. My recommendation would be that if they're not providing at least an update on the things they're seeing each quarter, ask them. Take a look at, they should be producing top trends or at least providing information on a regular cadence. Evaluate your stack or your security product at least every year. That would be the best thing. And I think when it comes to doing a pen test, and this is something we're battling with quite a lot at the moment, differentiate between a proper pen test and someone just calling it a pen test. And what I mean by that is,
you mean the free ones or the fully automated ones? Yes, yes.
Gosh.
We encounter these free pen tests all the time.
Yeah. Set up what a success criteria for your testing. Set up an actual proper, this is what it's going to look like. This is how long it's going to run for. This is what I'm monitoring, so that you can ask yourself whether or not your security product met your criteria. I understand not everyone's going to be able to pay the expense of doing a full pen test every year, because they are expensive, because you're hiring a human being to think outside the box and try and destroy your network. But yeah, every year, as a bare minimum, you should be taking a proper evaluation of your security product, probably before you review. or renew, sorry, I should say, and look at it every quarter. Don't just assume that it's sitting there offering you protection.
Perfect. And we invite, any customers, clients of F12 to engage with our cybersecurity consultants or CISSP folks to help navigate that. And we both have some pen test solutions, but we also work with third parties that we trust that can do phenomenal penetration tests. So
to your point there, Calvin calls us every quarter we meet with him to go over things that we're seeing in the threat landscape across our product and just what's happening in open source intelligence. We give an update on our research as well. So we fully encourage that. We love it when customers engage with us and talk about security. As you can tell, I could talk about it for days. I love this stuff. So
it's always the case in the technology stack. We're always more eager to talk about it sometimes than our customers are to listen to us. But say, Livy. Well, Nicole and David, thank you so much for helping us explore this topic. We covered a little bit about the entire framework that NIST had developed and where there are typical gaps in organizations, how Blackpoint helps fill that gap, and how Blackpoint solutions and certain other MDRs are different from others in the pack, provide better capabilities. And we discussed the incredible pedigree of Blackpoint. David, you've scared me. I now know MFA is not the silver bullet that I had hoped it was. Thank you both for joining our webcast. And to our audience, thank you as well.
Thank you so much.